Hello dear students, I hope that you are now clear about the basic anatomy and the physiological aspect of the autonomic nervous system. Now proceeding to the final aspect of the autonomic nervous system where I will tell you about the applied part related to the autonomic nervous system. Now the various aspects that has to be discussed under this topic that includes the autonomic drugs, then autonomic failure and the autonomic function test. So now this autonomic drugs, that is a pharmacological part of the autonomic nervous system, and here in the autonomic failure we have to discuss the various disorders of the autonomic nervous system. Now first we will look into the various autonomic drugs. So these are the drugs that exerts their effect by action on various autonomic receptors, that may be directly or indirectly. Now the various groups of the drugs that we have to discuss here, it includes the sympathomimetic drugs whose action mimics that of the sympathetic stimulation. Then second group of the drug, that is the sympatholytic drugs, or also called as the sympathetic blockers. Then third group, that is the parasympathomimetic drugs. Then the parasympatholytic drugs, also called as the parasympathetic blockers. And in addition to this, there is also another group of the drug that is known as the ganglion blocker drugs, that also we have to discuss briefly. So starting with the first group, that is the sympathomimetic drugs. So as the name suggests, sympathomimetic. So these are the drugs whose action is like that of the sympathetic stimulation. Their effect will be a mimicry of the sympathetic stimulation. So these are the adrenaline like drugs. Now you know the neurotransmitter that are released by the sympathetic nervous system. These are the adrenaline and the noradrenaline, or epinephrine and the norepinephrine. So any drugs whose effect is mimicking like that of the epinephrine or norepinephrine are the drugs under this group. Okay. So certain examples of the sympathomimetic drugs are adrenaline, noradrenaline. So these both, they are also natural neurotransmitter secreted by the nerve endings of the sympathetic system, and also these are the drugs available synthetically also. And other drugs like phenylephrine, isoproterenol, albuterol, these all are the drugs whose effect it is like that of the epinephrine or norepinephrine, or in other words you can tell that these are the drugs whose effect is like that of the sympathetic stimulation. Then second group, it is the sympathetic blockers, sympatholytic drugs, means a drug whose effect is like the opposite as that of the sympathetic stimulation. They will block the sympathetic effect. They will block the effect of the adrenaline or the noradrenaline. So that are the sympathetic blocker or sympatholytic drug. So there are various mechanisms by which these will act. So mechanism by which the sympatholytic drugs will act, it may be the prevention of a synthesis and the storage of the norepinephrine. The example is the reserpine. Okay. So certain drugs, they will prevent the synthesis and the storage of the norepinephrine at the sympathetic nerve endings and prevent their action. Then second mechanism, it may be certain drugs that will cause a prevention of the release of the norepinephrine. They will prevent the release of the norepinephrine from the nerve terminals, from the presynaptic nerve terminals, or from the vesicles, as for example the guanethidine. Then another mechanism is the blockage of the alpha receptors. You know the receptors of the adrenergic part of the sympathetic system. Okay, so there are alpha and beta receptors. So drugs that will block the alpha receptors like a phentolamine. Then the drugs that cause the blockage of the beta receptor. The examples are propranolol, metoprolol, timolol, etc. So these are the most commonly used drugs. Okay. Then certain drugs that will cause the blockage of a transmission of a nerve impulse through the sympathetic ganglion. So these are called as a ganglion blocker drugs. They will prevent this transmission from a presynaptic to the postsynaptic part. That means pre-ganglionic में से post-ganglionic में impulse पहुंचेगा ही नहीं. So that are ganglion blocker drugs. The examples are hexamethonium and the pentolinum. So these are the mechanisms by which the sympatholytic drugs or sympathetic blockers will work. So now here this table shows the various drugs whose action is either mimicking that of the sympathetic stimulation, or they are having opposite effect as that of the sympathetic stimulation. That means they are blocking the sympathetic stimulation. So you can see here there are various adrenergic receptors that you know, alpha 1, alpha 2, beta 1, beta 2, and beta 3. And here are the drugs. These are the agonist drug. That means these drugs will bind with the respective receptor and they will mimic the action as that of the sympathetic stimulation. While here are the groups of the drugs that are selectively bind to the receptors and block that particular receptor, and by that they will inhibit the sympathetic stimulatory activity. Okay? And detail about its mechanism of action, how they will work, what are their use, all that thing you will learn in your second MBBS during the pharmacology. These figures narrate the various drugs that are acting over the sympathetic nervous system. Either they are mimicking their action, that means they are help in the stimulation, or they are blocking their action. So first just see this chart that are showing the synthesis of the norepinephrine and also the epinephrine. So initially they are synthesized from the amino acid tyrosine, where there will be hydroxylation of the tyrosine to form the dopa, and from the dopa there will be formation of the dopamine, and from the dopamine by again hydroxylation there will be formation of the norepinephrine and also then the epinephrine by the carboxylation. Okay? And that neurotransmitter norepinephrine, it will be released from the nerve terminals whenever there is a sympathetic stimulation, and that norepinephrine or epinephrine, they will bind to the receptor and they will do its effect, and after that they will be recaptured, they will be retaken by the nerve terminus or they will be degraded. Okay, so this is a simple pathway of the norepinephrine and its further action. Now here just we have to see over the various drugs, they are acting at a various level. Okay? So here this dotted line shows the antagonistic, that means they are having a blocker effect over that particular part, while this solid line, they are showing the agonistic, they are having a similar effect as that of the sympathetic stimulation. Okay? And this part, it is showing inhibitory. You can see this is inhibitory and this arrow, it shows the stimulatory. Okay? So starting from the first point here, let us see the first step in the formation of norepinephrine. Okay? So this is the drug metyrosine. It is having an antagonistic effect or inhibitory effect at the first step in the formation of the norepinephrine. So this is a type of the antagonist or a sympathetic blocker. Similarly, the second is the reserpine, that is also having an inhibitory effect over this sympathetic activity. So they are acting at this level. They will prevent the formation of the norepinephrine from the dopamine. Then coming to the here, the amphetamine, tyramine, and the ephedrine. You can see this is a solid line and shows the arrow. So these are agonist. They will stimulate the release of this norepinephrine from the nerve terminals. So normally the neurotransmitters are stored at the nerve terminal within the vesicle. So this drug, they will increase the release of that neurotransmitter from the nerve terminals from their vesicles. Okay, and they are having an agonistic effect. They will mimic the sympathetic stimulatory activity. Then here this bretylium and guanethidine, they are having again blocking action or antagonistic effect at this level. So they will prevent the release of the norepinephrine from its nerve terminal and it will prevent further its action. So these are antagonistic effects. So this is again sympatholytic drugs. Okay. Then coming to here, these drugs isoproterenol, albuterol, like that are adrenergic agonist. They will directly act over the receptor, adrenergic receptor, but directly they will bind. Depending on the drug, they will bind to the receptor and they will stimulate the sympathetic part. So they are having a same effect as that of the normal sympathetic stimulation. Okay. While these are the adrenergic antagonist that are acting at the receptor level. So important are the alpha blockers and the beta blockers here. So they will either block the alpha receptor or the beta blockers depending on the type of the drug. So they will prevent the action of this norepinephrine or prevent the binding of norepinephrine over the receptor. So the further action of this norepinephrine will be prevented. So by blocking the receptor, they will prevent the sympathetic stimulation and they will cause a sympatholytic effect rather. Okay. So these are the antagonists. And then here you can see this is the inhibitory effect. But by inhibiting this step, they are having a sympathetic stimulatory effect. This is a solid line, so that is a stimulatory, but this here inhibitory. So as I have told, the norepinephrine that is once released or any neurotransmitter once it is released, it most of will be retaken by the presynaptic terminal. Okay, so they will be recaptured by a uptake one. But these drugs like a cocaine, tricyclic antidepressant like imipramine, they will inhibit this step. That means जो norepinephrine है उसका जो फिर से reuptake होना था, they will prevent that. So the norepinephrine will remain for a longer time at this postsynaptic portion, okay, or a postsynaptic membrane. So they will work for a longer time. So in this way, these drugs, cocaine and the tricyclic antidepressant, by inhibiting this step, they will increase the norepinephrine and they will increase the sympathetic stimulatory effect. So in this way, these are again agonists to the sympathetic. So these are again sympathomimetic drugs. So you are clear about this figure. The two types of these sympathetic drugs: sympathomimetics, that means that are sympathetic stimulatory, and second, sympathetic blocker or a sympatholytic, that are blocking the effect of the sympathetic stimulation, or they are having a sympathetic inhibitory effect. Okay. Then coming to the parasympathomimetic drugs. Drugs whose action is like that of the parasympathetic stimulation. So they are mimicry of this parasympathetic stimulation. So these are the acetylcholine like drugs. When administered in the body, produce the effects similar to the effect of the parasympathetic nerve stimulation. So parasympathetic stimulation करने के बाद जो भी effect आती है, that type of the effect given by this type of the drugs. So the types of the sympathomimetics, it can be of two important types. One are the drugs that are acting over the muscarinic receptor. You know the two types of the receptor as far as the parasympathetic receptors are concerned, muscarinic and the nicotinic. So certain drugs that are acting over the muscarinic receptor and cause a stimulatory effect. Example are pilocarpine and the methacholine. And second are the drugs that are prolonging the action of the acetylcholine. They are prolonging the action of acetylcholine like a neostigmine and the physostigmine. So how they will prolong the action? That is by inhibiting the activity of the acetylcholine esterase. So this is the enzyme that is causing a degradation of this acetylcholine. But these drugs, they will inhibit this enzyme. So the degradation of acetylcholine will be prevented. So acetylcholine will remain for a longer time in the synaptic cleft or over the synaptic or postsynaptic membrane. And the last one group, it is the parasympathetic blockers or a parasympatholytic. So drugs that will block the effect of the parasympathetic stimulation. So certain examples are atropine, hometropine, scopolamine, cyclopentolate, tropicamide. All these drugs are having a opposite effect as that of the acetylcholine, opposite to the acetylcholine effect. Now here in this table, you can see the various drugs whose action is either mimicking that of the parasympathetic stimulation or the action will block the parasympathetic activity. Okay. So now you know the two types of the cholinergic receptor, nicotinic and the muscarinic. Again, they are subclassified that we have already discussed. Now here are the groups of the drugs that are agonist, who will bind with the respective cholinergic receptor and its action will mimic as that of the parasympathetic stimulation. While here is the group of the drugs that will block the respective cholinergic receptor and they are having a blocking effect over the parasympathetic stimulation. So these are the parasympatholytic drugs. Now here another important thing is that the two important drugs, one is acetylcholine and second atropine. These are non-selective. That means they are having no any specific receptor for them. So this acetylcholine, irrespective of the type of the muscarinic receptor, maybe it M1, 2, 3, 4 or 5. Wherever they will bind, they will have a parasympathetic stimulatory activity. While the atropine, that is a non-selective parasympathetic blocker. That means it will block either of this muscarinic receptor, maybe it M1, 2, 3 or 4, 5. So these are the two important non-selective, while these all are selective drugs. So now this chart again showing the drug intervention at the cholinergic transmission. So here you know the acetylcholine, it is the important neurotransmitter or only neurotransmitter in the parasympathetic nervous system. So that is formed from its precursor, from the acetyl-CoA and the choline. When the acetyl-CoA and choline, they will combine in presence of the choline acetyl transferase enzyme, they will form the acetylcholine at the presynaptic terminal. Now these are the various drugs that are acting either to mimic the parasympathetic stimulatory effect or to block the parasympathetic system. Okay. So here first one here is the hemicolium. So as you know the dotted line that is showing the antagonist. So hemicolium, it is an antagonistic drug to the parasympathetic nervous system. So they will block the transport of the precursor which are required in the form of synthesis of the acetylcholine. Okay. Then second is the vesamicol. That is the drug that will block the storage of this acetylcholine. So normally the acetylcholine that is formed at the presynaptic terminal, it will be stored within the vesicle present at the presynaptic nerve terminal. Okay. But this vesamicol will prevent the storage of that acetylcholine, so by which it will decrease the acetylcholine level. Then botulinum toxin, that I think you have been taught in the nerve muscle physiology, in the neuromuscular disorder. So this botulinum toxin, it is a type of the drug that will prevent the release of the acetylcholine from the presynaptic terminal. So you know at the presynaptic terminal, when the vesicle, they will join to this and a certain presynaptic proteins like synaptin and syntaxin and synaptobravin. So this drug will prevent that. So because of this, there will be no exocytosis of the acetylcholine. So acetylcholine will be not released. So by this, it will block the effect of the acetylcholine, and it is a type of the parasympatholytic drug. Okay. Then coming to here, the cholinergic agonist, the drugs which are having acetylcholine-like effect. So like carbachol and the pilocarpine, that are directly binding to the acetylcholine receptor, nicotinic or muscarinic, and they will mimic the parasympathetic effect. Okay, so these are the cholinergic agonist. They will stimulate the cholinergic receptor and do its action like that of the acetylcholine. While these atropine, succinylcholine, trimethophan, these are the cholinergic antagonist. So antagonistic drug, basically they are blocking the receptor action. So this will block this acetylcholine or a cholinergic receptor, by which it will prevent the effect of the acetylcholine, and they will block the parasympathetic effect. So these are again a parasympatholytic drug. And then coming to here, the last part portion of the drug, it is the anticholine estrase. So the drugs like a neostigmine, physostigmine, and certain organophosphorus drugs, they are called as anticholine estrase drug. So here there is one enzyme that is known as acetylcholine estrase. So this acetylcholine estrase enzyme, what it will do, it will degrade this acetylcholine. Once the acetylcholine is released into the synaptic cleft, it will degrade the acetylcholine. So it will make the acetylcholine inactive. But these drugs, they will block the effect of acetylcholine estrase. That's why they are known as anticholine estrase. So by blocking the effect of this enzyme, they will prevent the degradation of this acetylcholine. So acetylcholine will remain for a longer time at the synaptic cleft or over the postsynaptic membrane. So they are having a prolonged action. So by which these drugs will act as a sympathomimetic drug or a parasympathomimetic drug or a parasympathetic stimulatory drugs or agonist drugs rather. So clear? So these are the various drugs that are acting at a various level across the cholinergic transmission. Okay. So this is all about the cholinergic drugs. And now coming to the second part of this lecture, that is the autonomic failure. Now this many of these autonomic disorders or the disease of the autonomic nervous system that are broadly termed as autonomic failures. Okay, and this autonomic failure, they can be classified in a two way, or there are two types of the autonomic failure, rather primary autonomic failure and the secondary autonomic failure. So primary autonomic failure means it is a type of the idiopathic failure, means कि यहाँ पे कोई दूसरा कोई secondary reason नहीं है. Either it may be due to the injury to the sympathetic or parasympathetic nervous system directly, or it may be direct lesion of that autonomic nervous system. No any secondary cause. Okay. And the most common symptom here in the primary autonomic failure, it is the orthostatic hypotension. जिस पेशेंट को प्राइमरी ऑटोनोमिक फेल्यूर है, उसकी मेन कंप्लेन होगी ऑर्थोस्टेटिक हाइपोटेंशन. मींस देयर विल बी हाइपोटेंशन, डिक्रीज्ड blood pressure on a changing the posture, mainly on the standing. When patient stand up, at that time there will be a severe fall in the blood pressure, and that may be transient. Okay. And second is the secondary autonomic failure. That means autonomic failure secondary to any other disease. Certain diseases like diabetes, amyloidosis, then sympathetic surgery, all that disease it may lead to the disorder of this autonomic nervous system, and that is known as a secondary autonomic failure, where the symptom may vary. Because the autonomic nervous system, it is concerned with the innervation to many of the visceral organs. It may be GI tract, it may be a cardiovascular system, kidney, reproductive system, etc. Okay, so the symptom, it may manifest as a multiple organ dysfunction. So there may be symptom of the GI tract, or it may affect the cardiovascular system, or it may affect the kidney likewise. Now, of this all the autonomic disorders, one of the most important that we have to discuss here in the detail, it is the Horner's syndrome. It is the most common and most important disorder regarding the autonomic failure. Okay. Now, this Horner's syndrome, it is basically due to the interruption of a sympathetic nerves to the head and neck, especially to the orbital portion, eye. So it is interruption of the sympathetic nerves, mainly to the eye, and usually it is seen at the cervical sympathetic chain. And it is also called as ipsilateral oculosympathetic paresis. So यहाँ पे किसी एक साइड की sympathetic system है that will be interrupted, which function will be interrupted, and rather it is also called as oculosympathetic paresis, because here the part of the sympathetic system that is interrupted, that is disturbed, it is the part that is supplying to the eye, mainly to the eye. So it is also known as oculosympathetic paresis. And the important clinical features of this Horner syndrome are a ptosis, then second is a meiosis, and third important feature, it is a facial anhidrosis. So these are the three predominant features of the Horner syndrome, or a oculosympathetic paresis, and that are seen over the only one side. Okay, because most of the time it is ipsilateral. So ptosis, that is a drooping of the upper eyelid. Upper eyelid ekdam paralyzed ho jayegi, it will droop down, and that is due to the paralysis of the Muller's muscle of the upper eyelid. That is the muscle, with the help of the levator palpebris superioris, it will help to elevate the upper eyelid, but because of its paralysis, the upper eyelid will droop down. Then second feature is meiosis. Meiosis means a constricted pupil or a small pupil, and that is because of the paralysis of the dilator pupillae muscle. Now you know the two muscles supplying the pupils, concerned with the pupillary action, dilator and the constrictor. Okay. Dilator pupillae muscle, it is supplied by the sympathetic part, while the constrictor pupillae muscle, it is supplied by the parasympathetic. So here there is a defect in the sympathetic portion, so the dilator pupillae muscle will be paralyzed. And because the parasympathetic is normal, the unopposed action of the parasympathetic system, it will cause a stimulation of the pupillae constrictor. Okay, so pupil will become a constricted, and there will be meiosis. And third is the facial anhidrosis, that is a reduced sweating on the ipsilateral face and the neck. एक side के face पे sweating will be decreased, because the nerve supplying to the sweat glands of that part, it will be again affected here. So that's why it is called as a facial anhidrosis. Okay. So now from this figure, it will be clear about the Horner syndrome. Now you know the control of the sympathetic as well as parasympathetic is from the higher center. So starting from the initial higher center, there is the pathway for the sympathetic system. Okay. Then here will be the cell body for the preganglionic fiber within the thoracic or the lumbar segment. Now, as far as the oculosympathetic chain is concerned, the cell bodies are present in the upper thoracic segment of the spinal cord. So from where the preganglionic fiber will emerge, and they will relay over the sympathetic chain. Okay. And from the sympathetic chain, so normally these fibers from the upper thoracic part, they will relay at the cervical ganglion. So this is the superior cervical ganglion. Okay. And from the superior cervical ganglion, the postganglionic fiber will emerge, and they will supply to the respective tissue. Now this blue part, blue colored lines that are suggesting the oculosympathetic part, or rather postganglionic oculosympathetic part, that is concerned with the supply to the sweat glands of the forehead, sweat glands of the face, then to the smooth muscles of the eyelids, that is the Muller's muscle, and the muscle of the pupil, that is the dilator pupillae muscle. So these are the various branches of this postganglionic sympathetic fiber that are innervating these muscles. Okay. Now whenever there is lesion to this, the lesion may be here at the first order neuron lesion due to the any disease like syringomyelia, or it may be due to the dissection of this sympathetic system, sympathetic fibers here, or the lesions may be here at the second order neuron. Again, it may be due to compression of these fibers of the sympathetic nervous system here because of the malignancy of lungs, or it may be due to any other reason. And again, the lesion may be also here at the sympathetic cervical ganglion. There again, it may be due to the compression due to the malignancy of the lungs, or due to the malignancy of the cavernous sinus. So the tumor of that may lead to the compression over this area, and this is the most common lesion और मोस्ट कॉमन कॉज ऑफ दिस ओक्यूलोसिम्पैथेटिक पैरालिसिस. ओके, सो कोई भी ट्यूमर की वजह से मानो कि यहाँ पे कंप्रेशन है, देन द इंपल्स फ्रॉम हियर टू हियर इट विल बी प्रिवेंटेड. सो उसकी वजह से सो देयर विल बी एनहाइड्रोसिस. स्वेट ग्लैंड के जो नर्व फाइबर्स है दे विल बी डिनर्वेटेड. सो स्वेट ग्लैंड्स पे सप्लाई आएगी, सो देयर विल बी डिक्रीज इन द स्वेटिंग ओवर द फोरहेड एज वेल एज ओवर द फेस. देन बिकॉज द नर्व फाइबर टू द दिस मुलर्स मसल ऑफ द आईलिड की जो मुलर्स मसल है उसकी भी नर्व फाइबर यहाँ पे इनहिबिट हो जाएगी, सो दैट विल बी पैरालाइज्ड. सो उसकी वजह से पेशेंट विल नॉट एबल टू एलिवेट अपर आईलिड प्रॉपर्ली. देयर विल बी अ पार्शियल ड्रूपिंग ऑफ द अपर आईलिड एंड दैट इज नोन एज अ टोसिस. और उसके अलावा यू नो द सिंपैथेटिक फाइबर्स आर आल्सो इनर्वेटिंग द डायलेटर पिपिली मसल थ्रू द लॉन्ग सिलियरी नर्व. सो दैट अगेन द डायलेटर पिपिली मसल विल बी पैरालाइज्ड. सो पीपल का डायलेटेशन नहीं होगा, लेकिन पीपल विल बी सीवियरली कंस्ट्रिक्टेड, क्योंकि यहाँ पे पैरासिम्पैथेटिक फाइबर्स है, दे आर इंटैक्ट एंड दे आर सप्लाइंग द कंस्ट्रिक्टर मसल ऑफ द पीपल. सो पीपल विल बी कंस्ट्रिक्टेड. सो these are the three very important and the predominant features of the Horner syndrome. So now in this figure again you can see the three important predominant features of the Horner syndrome. That includes, first one, it is the loss of sweating, that is the anhidrosis, basically over the forehead and the that side of the face. Okay. Then second, there is a partial drooping of the upper eyelid. Upper eyelid will be slightly paralyzed because of the paralysis of the Mueller's muscle, that is the elevator of the upper eyelid. And third important symptom, that is a small pupil. Rather it is a sign that there will be meiosis. Okay. So out of these two important features, there is a drooping of the upper eyelid and the meiosis, that is small pupil. You can also see in this figure. Okay, so here you can see this left side of the eye, it is a normal. The pupil size is normal, as well as the patient can completely open his eye. Okay, but here on the right side you can see in both the figure, okay, there is a partial drooping of the upper eyelid. यहाँ पे आप देख सकते हो there is a drooping of the upper eyelid, so that is partially obstructing the cornea. Here the cornea is completely visible, but it is partially obstructed in both the figure. So that is because of the paralysis of a Mueller's muscle. But there will be no complete paralysis of this upper eyelid, because the another elevator of the upper eyelid, that is the levator palpebris superior, it may be a normal. Okay. And second is the meiosis. Just you can compare the two pupils over this lower figure. Here is this is the normal pupillary size, while here you can see the size of the pupil is quite smaller. So that is because of the paralysis of the pupil dilator muscle. So here there will be a meiosis or a constriction of the pupil because of the unopposed action of a constricted pupil. So I hope you are clear about the various important signs and symptoms of the Horner syndrome. Okay. The treatment of this syndrome or a disorder, it will depend on the underlying cause. So you have to treat the underlying cause. Now the remaining part of the applied aspect of autonomic nervous system, where we have to discuss the autonomic function test, that I will discuss in the next session. Thank you.